Porter Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I think I'm listening to the Grimm's brothers' fables in the House here when I hear about chickens with the sky falling on their head. I thought that was question time, actually, Mr Speaker. And I just want to reflect on something that Todd McLeay said earlier in the House about the Labour Party talking about all these crises. Well, the one crisis that Todd McLeay did not mention in the House, Mr Speaker, was the house price inflation crisis in Auckland. That was a glaring hole in his debate today, because home ownership is important to New Zealanders, Mr Speaker. Home ownership speaks to the value that we place on our communities, on our individuals and on society as a whole. Home ownership means having a base for your family. It means stability. It actually means building connections into communities. It means building relationships for when times are hard. It means building social capital, and it means actually building a financial base that leverages off and then gives you much better outcomes. If you have a home, Mr Speaker, then your prospects in terms of your health, your children's health and your children's education is going to be better. So let's have a look at the home ownership rate, shall we? My colleague, the Honourable Phil Goff, said we have got the lowest home ownership rates in 64 years. Home ownership rates are declining. In 2006, home ownership was up over 50%. It was 53.2%. In 2013, it's down under 49.8%, and it's trending down year on year on year. And let's look at the age group that's most impacted by this drop in home ownership rate, shall we? The age group which has dropped the most are the people aged 30 to 39. Just the people you would think, sir, who have got a little bit of capital behind them, they've done their education, they're in good careers, and they would be ready to buy their first home. They are also the people who are starting to have their families, sir. So what is this saying? If we do some analysis of these numbers, it means that we are going to have generation upon generation of families who do not know what home ownership looks like, and that's a shame. And I tell you one further statistic, Mr Speaker, who have the least home ownership rates in this country, and that's Pacific people, 18.5%. 18.5%, that's a shame, Mr Speaker. And of that wider Pacific group, the people most impacted are those from the Cooks and Tuvalu. So what's this about? Well, let's have a look at a quote from the Prime Minister, who is worried about rising inequality, but said he did not believe home ownership was no longer possible for low-income families. Well, I've got to ask you, does the Prime Minister believe that middle-income families are finding it easy? Clearly they are not, if more than half of New Zealanders cannot afford to get into their own home. The numbers speak for themselves. And then the three-headed housing monster over on that side of the House pulls its levers, the LVRs, the Homestart incentives, and what effect have they had? Virtually nothing. Virtually nothing. And here we are, we collect all this data on every aspect of home ownership. Do we ever collect the data on non-resident ownership? Would it be so hard, considering you've got so much information about everything else? We know that the reason that this government doesn't collect data on non-resident ownership is because it will confirm what we've been saying all along. And then we get the Prime Minister transferring Andrew Little's question about overseas ownership in the House today, and the National Party MPs stand up and say that we're scared. Well, where was the Prime Minister? Scuttling off. He scuttled off. He didn't want to answer that question, and they call us scared. Okay, so the question of non-resident overseas ownership of land, of New Zealand land and homes, is that not important to the Prime Minister? I wonder about that. Or does the Prime Minister not want to be associated with the controversy? He can't take the heat, especially when we know that the sharks are circling on the other side of the House, that there are being pitches made for the new leader of the National Party. We all know that on this side of the House. We watch it every day. We watch the sharks circling. We watch the groups forming. Mr Speaker, I just want to say this is a government that takes no responsibility. It takes no responsibility for decreasing home ownership. It takes no responsibility for land sales. And I can't wait until 2017, Mr Speaker, when the public of New Zealand get to answer the big question, and it will be a big F for failure for this government.